Right, thank you. So hello everyone, good morning, afternoon, good night, depending where you are. Today is the 5th day of the DevDays online, and we're now starting with the desktop products. And well, today it's about Civil3D and Infraworks update by myself, Augusto Gonçalves. And right after that, Sasha Crotty will start with the Revit API update. So as we're talking here about beta products, including the next release of our products, anything that we say about those products may change. We're still in beta. So yeah, please be aware of that. And this is a very important message. Okay, going next. So today's, at this first part of the presentation is about Civil3D Q, Kai or something, which is 2020 version. And also about Infraworks 2019.3, which is the last release of Infraworks. Remember that we have quarterly releases of Infraworks, and just pointing out a few things we had on the last release. So going to Civil3D, I think the biggest update is about Dynamo support that is coming on the next release. So if you're not aware of Dynamo, Dynamo is a visual programming tool that aims to be accessible to both non-programmers and programmers alike. And this initial release is focused on corridor workflows and gives a preview of the possibilities of Dynamo's integration. So to demonstrate that, I have a very interesting video from development team. It's just demonstrating those features. And let's see if that will start playing. Okay, and well, it's showing how it works. It's a bit speeded up, just to demonstrate the idea. So I have the new button of Dynamo inside Civ3D, and well, for this demonstration, I have a file with a corridor. That's the classic. There's the corridor 6 sample drawing on Civ3D, and the first part is to get the corridor feature line from that drawing, and you see that I'm using the sidebar with AutoCAD information on Civil3D, and I'm getting the active drawing. From that drawing, I'm getting the information about the feature line, and then also connecting a create text and create circle in Civil3D using that information. So in this case, we're mixing both Civil3D and AutoCAD features to automate that process. Everything is visual, and when we run it, we can see the circles and the text indicating the elevation at that specific point. So there's a very interesting way to automate tasks with Dynamo, and which is coming for Civil3D. Interesting. So moving forward, let me move to the next. Sorry about that. I don't want to play the video again. Okay, a few extra things that are coming. Civil3D Storm and Sanitary Analysis and Enhancement. We have a few extra features on that UI on the product. The peak rate factor, and that's some improvement that some customers request, and it makes it more usable. So those things that are marked in yellow at that screen. The next piece is about rail core-based alignment report. In that alignment report, now fully support alignments that are core-based stationing, core-based calculation, commonly used, and highway projects to simplify alignment layout on the ground. So there's a few enhancements there. Next one is about analyze gravity network enhancements. So this is a new window that allows us to a wizard to replace the modulus dialog box, and now enables you to interact with the drawing while you are editing the drawing. The next one, it's about rail alignment interoperability with Infraworks. So when importing or exporting files via IMX, rail alignments can be treated as either centerline or Infraworks rail alignments, which is something that is also improved the interoperability of those products. Next one, survey database format and migration utility. The survey database format has been updated to Microsoft SQL Server Compact, format to SQLite, which is more flexible. To use existing survey databases with Civil3D they must be converted to SQLite, and this is the migration utility that is available will be available on Civil3D. Next one, export Civil3D drawing rework. So the export Civil3D drawing command has been updated to enable much more predictable results. New options to export feature lines as either 2D or 3D polylines. Civil3D object labels with background masks are no longer exported with a bounty-shaped hatch, and XREFs are exploded appropriately on export. And export Civil3D drawing command no longer calls Civil3D to crash. It was a problem that was happening. And proxy state messages are no longer displayed on export. Note that these enhancements will also be available on Civil3D 2018.3 update. Now on Infraworks, I have a few things that are already there on Infraworks 19.3. The connector for ArcGIS is already there, and the connect to ArcGIS Enterprise portal using the Autodesk connector for ArcGIS, and this allows you to add public data and history data to ArcGIS data sources. Next one is about country kits. We added 6 country kits for Infraworks that can be installed using the Autodesk desktop connector. We have now Germany, France, Austria, UK, Sweden, and Norway. And last one about Infraworks, the roadway design, update profile view with enhancement capabilities, and edit mades to vertical alignments in the model or profile view do not cause model regeneration until the edits are committed, which improves the performance. The feature overrides the default behavior in which every modification to the road center line geometry causes model to regeneration. So this is a change on that performance as well. Infraworks surface layers added the ability to manage multiple terrain surfaces in the surface layer panel. Subsurface layers are now supported, and stack order of subsurface layers can also be managed in the surface layer panel. So those are the updates for Infraworks, and all of those updates are available as the version 2019.3. And with that, in very short 10 minutes, you can use the question panel to, if you have any questions on that. You can also raise your hand or use the Q&A panel. Questions?
Thank you, Augusto.
Yeah.
If
Thank
no question, yeah, Bill, recording, please.
Yeah, started.
Okay, great. Hi, everybody. So I am Sasha Karate. I am the Revit product manager responsible for the Revit platform and Revit services that we're building out on Forge, including Revit Cloud Work Sharing. And today I'm going to be chatting to you guys about the Revit API update, kind of what's new, what's coming in the near future. All right, so kind of in terms of agenda for what I'm going to cover, I'm going to talk a little bit about Revit API changes, and we've always kind of done this historical breakdown of must-do, so things that are going to be breaking changes that you do have to consider just in updating your application, and then enhancements that you may want to take advantage of to improve your products. And then I'll talk a little bit about going beyond the desktop and what we're doing there in terms of connecting to cloud services. So first of all, a quick disclaimer, this is all under NDA, and please don't make purchasing decisions based on what you hear here. And then if that is way too much text for you, I've simplified it down to haiku. So we're not making promises. Everything you see here may change, and please don't make purchasing decisions. And so jumping into the Revit API changes and the must-dos, these are, as I mentioned, these are the breaking changes and removed APIs. The fantastic thing is that over the years, I think you'll find that we have actually significantly decreased the number of breaking changes. And I was very pleasantly surprised as I was putting together this presentation at how few there were this year. So that's actually a big area of excitement for me, that we're really stabilizing and we're not making a lot of these breaking changes for you guys every year. So the first one in here is, and this is kind of probably the most significant one out of everything, is the change to CF# versioning. And basically what was happening is that due to conflicting versions at the time of when CF# was loaded by different add-ins or Revit, we were having instability and crashes that were happening. So what we've done to resolve that, because there really can only be one version of CF# running, we basically have moved up the initialization process for that to the very beginning of Revit startup. So now Revit will kind of define the version that is used in the Revit process. So that's version 65.0.1, and we are enabling this legacy JavaScript binding as an option during startup. So this is just something to be aware of, that this is, you know, if you're ready, or if you're creating a Revit add-in that uses CF#, you'll have to be using the capabilities in this version, and our plan is to kind of incrementally update that from release to release so we start to use some of the latest technologies. In terms of MEP API changes, very small change where we changed the get material thickness function to a property. Just minor change, but something you might have to take do if you're starting to use fabrication parts. In terms of structural changes, we actually got rid of get subpart IDs for structural connection handlers, and that was because the functionality is actually removed, so there is no replacement at this point. So this method has been deprecated. It'll work for another year, but it will not be making it come back at this point. We've also made some small changes in the export API. This is for custom export. If you're actually exporting 3D geometry directly using this exporter, we've actually now changed this function from not just supporting 3D views to supporting 2D views as well, and I'll talk about that more later. And then in terms of image API changes, because of import PDF support and changes to how we manage images, there are a number of methods that have been deprecated. And again, we'll talk about this more later as well. And then last but not least, and I said that this section is kind of short, which is great, is that any APIs that were deprecated last year would have been, or actually let's just say 2019, I apologize. Anything that was deprecated in Revit 2019 will be removed in the upcoming version. And that lets me switch over to enhancements and talk about new APIs and capabilities. So this is the fun part of this presentation. So the first thing in here is that we've added support for attached detail groups for groups, and there's kind of a number of different things that you can do, but you can now show and hide detail groups. You can identify which detail groups are applicable to what. You can check if an attached detail group and a view have the same orientation to make sure that if you enable it, you'll actually be able to see it. And then you can also get the detail group's attachment status, so you can find out whether it's attached and what it is attached to. And then for a given group type, you can actually get a list of all the attached detail groups that are something that are available to be for attachment. I talked a little bit about PDF import and images earlier, and this is a video showing the new PDF import capability. And this is, PDFs are brought in as an image. You can start to specify the DPI that you want to bring it, that you want to use for bringing it in. And then the other powerful thing about the functionality is you can actually snap to vector PDFs. So you can actually start to model and create your models from that. And as we do with all our new features, there's an expectation that an appropriate API is available for any new functionality that we develop. Therefore, we actually have the associated APIs that enable all these changes to happen. So the first thing is we've actually changed image type so that it now supports multiple instances of the same type. This was not possible before, so every time you wanted to place another copy of the same image, you had to create a new type. Now you don't have to do that. You just load the image once and you can place as many instances as you want. You can also, basically, we've also adjusted it so that you can use different path types to specify where an image lives. So it's no longer just relative. You can also use relative, absolute paths, or external resource types in case you want to actually replace the image location with something other than a file, say a cloud resource or cloud location. You can also now load a specific page from a PDF, and we've decoupled image loading and placement, obviously because loading is now a one-time operation into the type, and placement is something that you do with an instance. So image type options is a new class that allows you to specify different options for image types. Please check out the What's New documentation if you want more details on that. I obviously can't cover every single thing in this presentation, but that is a great resource for you guys if you want a little bit more detail about what are the different new capabilities and image type options. As I mentioned a little bit before, we now have the ability to place an image instance, and an image instance is a new class. It represents an image placed in a view. You can get and set the location, get and set the width and height, and you can also enable snapping. So this is only applicable, obviously, to PDF-based instances, but that is also available in the API, as I was showing in the video. In terms of UI API changes, we've added a new capability to the task dialog. If you have an operation that is indeterminate in length, you can actually have the task dialog show an animation that continues going around and around, basically showing that there is progress being made, that something is happening, but we don't actually know how long it will take. That animation continues until the customer closes the task dialog. For dockable panes, this was a big request. We heard a lot from a lot of you that this was something that you needed. So you now have the ability to set a minimum width and minimum height. So these, now the dockable panes is not going to be too small for the information that you are trying to present. So other enhancements that we made. So in 2019.2, we released a capability called Cloud Models for Revit. That's the way it shows up in Autodesk accounts, which is managed.autodesk.com. But essentially what this capability is the creation of non-work shared cloud models. So we have Revit Cloud Work Sharing, which is the work shared cloud model. We introduced the same capability for a simpler capability for subscribers that doesn't include the work sharing aspect of it. And the reason that we wanted to do that is we really wanted to make sure that we were consistent about how cloud models and local models behaved. So what we had is, in a local file, you had the ability to enable work sets that created a multi-user work shared file. Now we've actually introduced a non-work shared file and work shared cloud model, non-work shared cloud model and a work shared cloud model. And now you can actually have the same capability of enabling work sets between them. And this is really the way that we're trying to create this consistency where there really shouldn't be very much difference between cloud models and desktop models in terms of behavior, but certainly capabilities in terms of the location of the data and access to the BIM 360 ecosystem. The one thing I want to point out is in terms of the enabled work sets capability, you do have to have access to a BIM 360 design entitlement to be able to do that, because again, that creates a work shared cloud model. In terms of APIs that support this kind of behavior, the first thing is we've actually added a number of APIs that allow you to get more information about work shared cloud models, or pretty much any cloud model. So you can start to get information about whether a model is a cloud model, what its unique identifier is so that you can open it later. And then you also can get the cloud model path. So you can understand what is the path of the model that you're dealing with. For non-work shared cloud models, there are a number of new APIs. The first one is Save as Cloud Model. This basically creates a new non-work shared cloud model. You do have to have the end user who's performing this operation does have to have an entitlement to cloud models for Revit, which is part of a Revit subscription or a collection subscription. Then we also have an API to save a cloud model, and the reason that this is a bit different is Save for non-work shared cloud models actually syncs the changes to the cloud. So this is why it's a little bit of a different API. And then the third API that we have for non-work shared cloud models is to enable cloud work sharing, and this is kind of the enable work sets functionality. The reason that this is really, really powerful is while we still don't have an API to create a Revit Cloud work sharing model, these two APIs in combination actually allow you to work around that restriction by creating a non-work shared model first and then adding work sets and therefore resulting in a Revit Cloud work shared model. The other thing I'll point out here is that I would not consider this area of our API development to be complete, so this continues to be an active area, so I expect to see more APIs as we go forward, just to give you kind of a look into the future. Other things that we've done over the last probably 4 or 5 releases, we've added more and more background calculations that basically are non-blocking operations to a user that allow them to continue working while Revit is still processing and making sure that the model is consistent. This is really powerful, but at the same time, there are some operations that are blocked during this time, including save, close, export and print, sync with central, so those kind of things. And sometimes it's useful for an add-in to understand that that's happening. So now we've provided a new method that you can check to determine whether Revit is actually doing something in the background, even though a user has access to perform other operations. In terms of changes to categories, we've now added a new property to categories to determine whether it is visible in the UI. So some categories in Revit are actually hidden from a lot of UIs, like visibility of graphics and view filters. Now you can determine that state through the API as well. And another enhancement that we've made for categories is getting the category the name of the category in the current Revit language. So rather than kind of the English version, if you want to get the name of the category in French because that's the version that you're running, you can do that. In terms of geometry APIs, this is actually kind of a small change this year in terms of geometries, but we did add a few enhancements to curve loops. So you can now get the number of curves in a curve loop. And then you can also offset a curve loop with an array of offset distances. So you can provide an array for each curve, and it will offset that curve by that distance, or sorry, that specific curve by that distance. So it's a lot more flexible. Previously, the only way was to define one offset for all curves. Another thing that we've invested in was a view template API. This was another big request on Revit Ideas and other places where you were asking to be able to create view templates. Now you can actually go ahead and do that. So now we have an API to take a view, create a view template from it, and then actually you can apply that to the view. Now the interesting thing is the majority of the APIs used in this sample already existed before this release. So the big change in the API is just the ability to create a new view template. and identifying whether a specific view is valid for template creation. The rest of the APIs were actually, sorry about the typo. The rest of the APIs were already available, but what we've done is we've created a new sample to help you find them. That new sample is called View Template Creation and demonstrates the capabilities of the new APIs and the existing APIs. The other enhancement that we've made is the enhancement to view filters. So a few releases ago, we added the ability to do OR in filters. But the feedback that we heard from a lot of our customers was that this was the way that filters work was too restrictive, because the properties that you could use in filtering were only the ones that were matched all the categories, which didn't really make sense from an OR perspective. So what we've done is we've actually added the ability to specify in a filter, in an OR filter, which category you're interested in for that part of the filter, and then that gives you access to more parameters for actually filtering for that category. You can also say, give me only the list of properties or parameters that apply to all the categories, and then you would get that traditional list that you've always had for AND filters. This is the goal here, is to make OR filters much more powerful and flexible, where you can actually start to say that, you know, you want doors with a certain fire rating, but windows with a family name, and then walls with a certain structural use. So you can start to get really powerful and really creative with your OR filters. As a result of that, we've relaxed a lot of the restrictions on element filters that are stored in a parameter filter element, which is the API representation of a view filter. So that enables the creation of those same flexible filters that you see in the UI. And then there's a lot more details about what the new restrictions are. Please do see the API What's New documentation for the details. I didn't want to copy paste it here because it would fill up the entire page. In terms of other things that we've enhanced for our filters, you can also now easily get a list of all the parameters associated with all rules of a filter. So this is just something that simplifies getting that information. And then you can also easily set the set of filters in an element logical filter. So again, the goal here is to make it really easy to update and change filters as you need to build the combinations that you need to create to filter things. And one thing I do want to commend the team that's been working on, on the filter UI. I mean, we certainly could have done a project that would have allowed a better filter UI, but the team has really gone out of their way to make sure that we have a full capability and equivalent capability in the API, and that we're actually using the same API filtering for defining view filters. So that was it was a big part of the work, substantial effort for our team, but they really did make sure that we were consistently providing the same thing in the API as the UI. In terms of parameter updates, the powerful thing you can do is, again, another request that we've heard a lot from you is the need to get the localized name of a parameter. So if you have built-in parameters, Revit has a bunch of different translations. Say you need to get width in German, you can do that. You can go ahead and just request the label for that parameter and specify which language you would like to get it in, and Revit will return that to you. Another enhancement is the ability to control the visibility of shared parameters only when it does not have a value assigned. So when you first create a shared parameter, it doesn't have any value. In that state, you may not want to have it show up in the UI. To do that, there's now a hide when no value property for an external definition, which sets that for a shared parameter. And we also have the ability to clear the value of a parameter back to that state, but only for parameters that have this hide when no value option set. So that just something that that is available, but only for these types of parameters that are hidden. So, and then the other thing is, the other enhancement that was done for filters, for view filters, was the ability to say, can I filter on whether a parameter has no value? So that was something that was added in the UI, but it's also been added to the API. So now you can actually define a number of new filter rules that let you make a decision about the presence of a parameter, or just simply say it exists or does not exist. And then the other thing is that you can also start to do this for filtering schedules. So in schedules, you can also filter by whether a parameter has a value or does not. Other enhancements to schedules, we can now control the visibility of schedule grid lines on a sheet. So basically, you can set this property. When you place that schedule on a sheet, it will either show the grid lines or not. And we also added the ability to control the zoom level of the text in a schedule. Just so you know that this is only affects the schedule view itself. It doesn't affect the representation of that schedule on a sheet. And it is a temporary setting where it does disappear after the session, or gets reset after the session. So this is a video of site functionality that was added in 2019.1. The reason that I bring it up here is because this was a project that actually didn't meet our expectations for having an equivalent API when the new functionality is released. And that's unfortunate, but I think the great thing is that we've been able to go back and remedy this. We wanted to make sure that all third-party developers were able to create the same topography surface and the same capabilities that we do through BIM 360 through the Revit API, and so we've been able to do that. And the way that that has happened is now for a topography surface, we have a new creation method that allows the same kind of detailed, precise creation of a topography surface given a list of triangulation facets. So basically, you send the exact triangles you want to see, and that is what Revit will actually represent in the mesh. And then we've also exposed the topography link type. So this is a type of link that is brought into Revit. So now you can actually start to take advantage of that API as well to link topographies into Revit. Other enhancements, as we continue to do more integrations between our infrastructure customers and our design customers and our building customers, we are starting to see more and more enhancements in areas. So not only topography is getting enhanced, but we're also enhancing the coordinate systems. So we now have the ability to set the geo coordinate system for a site location, and then project base points, you can actually start to get the information about its position, whether in Revit's internal coordinates or the shared coordinates, the transform coordinates. Either way, you can start to understand where the base point is located. In terms of other enhancements, so we've also enhanced parts, and the way we've enhanced parts is actually, so I should say, we've enhanced direct shapes to support parts. And the reason that we're starting to look at this is because this is, again, a requirement in terms of our infrastructure customers bringing in large amounts of data, in particular bridges, concrete bridges, into Revit and wanting to detail them in Revit. And we are supporting that by basically enabling the creation of parts, subdivision of those big objects that are brought in as direct shapes, and then taking advantage of a lot of the capabilities of parts to complete and modify those direct shapes. So as I mentioned, parts can now be created from direct shapes. There's actually no new API for this, but it is, direct shapes are essentially now an object that can participate in the existing parts APIs. And then the other thing, the one new API here is that you can actually check whether direct shape or a direct shape type can create parts or not, because there are a number of reasons why part creation on a direct shape could fail due to the complexity of the shape and other factors. And then the other thing you can actually start to identify from a divided part is you can get the original curves that were sketched to create that part. So if somebody sketched the curves in the UI, you can start to get those curves. Or if somebody split a part split a direct shape using a reference plane or a level or grid to create a part, you can get the reference to that element. Another kind of really powerful tool, so we've had a lot of usage of 3D custom export for 3D views. And this is the API that allows you to plug in directly into Revit's graphics system as it's outputting and drawing to the screen. So you get a representation of exactly what Revit sees returned to you through an interface that you can override. Now, what we've done is we've actually extended the same capability that we have for 3D views now to plans, sections, and elevations. So you can start to export the same information that you see in a 2D view directly to your application and kind of gathering that data for a consistent visual representation. Changes here are certainly that the custom exporter now supports plan, section, elevations, and those are the only 3D views that are supported. We don't support, the only 2D views that are supported. Those are the only 2D views. And please make sure to use the appropriate context. So there is a new context that is submitted to the custom exporter. I export context 2D as a new class specifically for 2D views. And has 4 new methods in addition to the base class, I export context. And this is, things that are specific to 2D objects. This is, in terms of 2D elements that are, only 2D elements, the beginning of an element, end of that element, getting an edge and a silhouette. And we've also created a few new classes that represent 2D exported objects that are not present in 3D views, and that includes element nodes, face edge nodes, and face silhouette nodes. And if you're trying to kind of understand how to better use this, we've also created an updated sample called Custom Exporter, Custom 2D Exporter, that was actually, I guess it wasn't, that was not the thing that didn't show this video. But it is available to you, so you can actually start to understand how to use this API and the kinds of things that it returns. So this is one of the more complicated APIs, but this is another thing that we built out because it was really important for some of our internal technologies to be able to do it. So it's great to see us be able to take advantage of that work and actually share something with you that has actually been requested a lot as well. Another area of enhancements are multi-reference annotations. So you can actually add additional references from the model now, so you can actually modify those references after they're created. And then you can identify whether a 3D view is valid for a specific multi-reference annotation. It's important that they're aligned, that the normals are pointed in the same direction. So we've created an easy validation function for you to go ahead and do that. Other things, enhancements. This is kind of a big enhancement for architects, is the creation of paths of travel. So this is a new feature in Revit. Where given 2 endpoints, Revit finds the fastest and shortest path for somebody occupying that space to walk through. And the powerful thing is because this is integrated into a lot of other Revit capabilities, you can actually start to create view filters and things like that that color code based on requirements that an architect may have. So this is step one in terms of our ability to integrate analysis directly into Revit, where we can provide feedback to customers interactively about their designs so we can actually help them make smarter design decisions. And here you can see that there is creating a rule-based filter. That's color coding paths that are longer than a certain distance, and they can say that in that case there's probably a need to modify that design because that path is too long. We have the same associated API for this. Again, everything that we've created is exposed to the API. So the new path of travel class calculates the shortest distance between 2 points. You can actually use it to create one path of travel or multiple paths of travel, given 2 different ways to set up the arrays of start and end points. And you can also get the information about a specific path. There are also a set of project-wide settings that define how a path behaves, and that includes certain category IDs that you may not be interested in. So you saw an example earlier that the path of travel went around tables. You may want to say that you actually want to ignore furniture for your purposes, and you can actually make that kind of setting. And then it also specifies what the top and bottom of the view is. So like how far do you want to go in terms of things that may impact your path. Really small enhancements to railings. Balusters now can get the localized name of a host or top rail, so you can use that as a reference into the, to understand what host or top rail it belongs to. There are also a few structural API enhancements. The first one is to freeform rebar, which can now generate based on 1 or more shared parameters. Shared parameters are not an option previously, and it is possible to do that now. And there's a new API to add or move and get the updating shared parameters. And then another API to understand how those parameters may have changed since the last regeneration. In terms of structural connection handlers, there's also now the ability to allow or disallow overriding the parameters for a specific connection type. So if you want to override, if a specific connection wants to be different from the type, you can go ahead and set this property that copies all the type parameters into the instance, makes them instance parameter, and that connection will behave according to those instance properties until you remove the override. So it will no longer derive its properties from the type. And then in terms of MEP Fabrication Parts, you now have the ability to get the insulation lining geometry for a fabrication part. And then given a selected set of fabrication elements, you can go ahead and change the service that's associated with them. Small enhancements were probably really useful in terms of efficiently changing the behavior of things. And then in our continued enhancement of electrical, you'll see there's a couple of API enhancements that came out of that as well. So you can actually get the circuit connection type of a specific electrical system, and then you can identify whether the feed-through lugs of a base panel are occupied or not. And that pretty much sums up the changes in terms of Revit APIs themselves, but I did want to take a moment to talk a little bit about Revit Cloud Services, and particularly Revit Design, or sorry, the Forge Design Automation API for Revit, otherwise known as Revit.io. If you guys didn't catch this at AU, I did want to make sure that I covered this. So the Forge Design Automation API makes available the engines of our products in a way that allows you to perform batch operations using data from AutoCAD, from Inventor, and now in public beta, Revit. So you can start to use Revit's engine to process Revit data in a cloud without having to have an install of Revit. The way this works is your app would submit a job to Forge and request that Revit.io process some information. Then Design Automation can create a Revit file based on data that you specify. It can take a Revit file and extract data to whatever format that you're defining, and you can start to use that data to create charts or put in a database. It's really up to you how you use that data. And ultimately, we also want to support the ability to modify Revit files. So we can actually do that now, but it is going to be modifying a detached version of the file. Things that we're looking at longer term is actually connecting the service to cloud models, because then you can actually start to go ahead and modify that central that's located in the cloud and actually truly have a dynamic relationship between end users working on a model and automated tools that are doing background operations. So how does it work? The first thing is you have to make your data available online. We cannot access something on your local premises, so you do have to upload it somehow to the cloud, and that can be input data or it can be RVT files. It really depends on what kind of job you're running. We don't actually care which cloud. So it doesn't have to be in the Autodesk cloud. It can be any location of your choice. Hopefully your data is already up there and you don't actually have to copy it anywhere. The next thing that happens is that you send the links to your data to Forge. That gives us permission to access that data temporarily. The Design Automation API then goes ahead and pulls down all the input information that you've given us, runs the job, and uploads the results back via links. It's pretty much that simple. And the key thing is that we don't store your data longer than we're processing the job. So all of the data, everything that happened in Forge as part of Design Automation is discarded. And then we upload the results to your specified location. So details of the system, just so you guys know, it is DB only, so there is no UI because it's a cloud service with no UI, so you can only access the Revit DB DLL. It is the same Revit API you're used to, so that's the great thing, other than the APIs to submit jobs to the service. There is no access to the network during the execution of a job, so there is no way for you to code check something on a separate server, and there is no way for you to get user interaction in the middle of your job. That means that there are no sticky sessions. You can't have a user dynamically interacting with Design Automation. There's other limitations. Some of them are more flexible than others. Most likely we'll remove most of them. But for the time being, there's no printing, there's no IFC, there's no Navis export, and desktop connector is not supported. But the cool thing you can do is you can run a lot of jobs in parallel, you can automate tedious tasks, you can have multiple versions of Revit. You don't have to worry about maintaining multiple versions of Revit on a server somewhere. We do that for you. So we will support kind of current versions of Revit and going forward as well. And then ultimately, there is no Revit license needed. The final business model is still to be TBD. For the time being, public beta is actually free for you to use. And if you're really interested and you're wondering, how do I take advantage of this? Well, there is actually a Boston Forge Accelerator coming up. And so this is a great opportunity to work with our team because the team working on the service is based in Boston. So if you want to work directly with the people who are creating the service, provide feedback to us, this is a great opportunity to go ahead and participate. Come to the Boston office 4 or 5 days and create a prototype application that you can take home with you. With that, I think I'm actually done. Mikhailka, do you want to take questions now?
Yeah, there are a few questions. in the Q&A panel.
So the first question I see, if close is locked because of open operations, what occurs if the user kills the process? Well, I think it's the same thing that would happen. So basically, at that point, the close operation is not able to execute, so they would most likely lose their data. Hopefully, they will save a backup of what they'll do. I mean, it's not, the API just exposes what's happening, but the user can't click close at that point. The close operation will actually happen once the process completes. So why is the parameter clear value only for hide when no value class? Why not for all parameters? I actually don't know the answer to that. I expect it is due to possible loss of data, but I'd have to double check, so we can probably get back to you on that one. Will you consider adding custom export enhancements to 2018 and 2019 while they are supported? At this time, we don't have any plans for backporting this capability. This represents probably a year and a half of work for our team, so that would be very challenging to get into a previous version. And at this point, we actually don't have any updates planned for those that would include new functionality. Is there an API for placing a detailed group for a model group? I believe so. I believe so, yes, and I think it already exists. I don't know if you guys, anybody on the Forge DevTech team can confirm that. Is there a timeline for design automation to be able to modify cloud models? At this point, unfortunately, that's not something I can answer. It's going to be a while though, because we want to get to the service to production first. But it is #1 priority for once we get there. So the shortest path seems really interesting. Are there any plans to implement a 3D version of this algorithm? So potentially, I think our goal is really to start to think about analysis in a broader sense. So a lot of the tool certainly is capable of dealing with 3D. This is kind of an agent-based simulation, actually, technology that we're using in the back end. So certainly that's something we may consider. And then there are other use cases such as fire egress and things like that that we've thought about in the past. Okay. Test dialog, is that only Revit 2020 or previous version updates? Well, I can't officially comment on Revit 2020 as a name or things like that. This will be it would only be for future updates as well. All right, that looks like all the questions. So yeah, I guess there's a couple of questions in the chat as well. Will the slides be made available after the webinar? I'm happy to make the slides available to you guys. The only thing is I will take out the videos from those because I can't share those, unfortunately. But the rest of the slides, I'm happy to share. And then please do check out the what's new in the API documentation, because that has even more details on what I've talked about today. Thank you.